In the spring of 1988, the chairman of General Motors called the Pontiac Fiero a stature car, a car the company was proud of, a car with a future. What Roger Smith didn't mention was that the factory building, it was already weeks from being shut for good. The Fiero wasn't failing. After 5 years, it had finally become a real sports car. So why was GM about to bury it? The Pontiac Fiero was the first mass-produced mid-engine sports car ever built in America. 2 seats, plastic body panels over a steel space frame, and a shape that, from across a parking lot, could pass for something Italian at 4 times the price. When it launched in 1984, it was the most successful new car introduction in Pontiac's history. More than 136,000 sold in the first year. It paced the Indianapolis 500. It made Car and Driver's 10 best list. 4 years later, the company that built it walked away. Ask why, and almost everyone gives you the same answer. The answer you'll hear is the Corvette. The story goes that the Fiero got too good, that it started embarrassing Chevrolet's flagship, and GM killed it to protect the crown jewel. It's a clean story. It's also not the one that decided the Fiero's fate. The Fiero died because of a building. One factory in Pontiac, Michigan, and a second car that was never built. But start with what makes the ending so strange, because it's true no matter which theory you believe. For its first 4 years, the Fiero rode on borrowed parts, a front suspension out of the economy Chevy Chevette, a rear lifted from a front-wheel drive compact and turned around backward. It was cheap, and it drove like it. Then, for 1988, Pontiac spent a reported $30 million and threw all of that out. A new front suspension, a new rear, 4-wheel disc brakes. Reviewers who'd spent 4 years calling it a fake suddenly couldn't stop praising it. The car the engineers had wanted to build back in 1983 finally existed. Production ended that same year. Here's what gets left out of every retelling. The Fiero was built in exactly one plant, Pontiac Assembly in Pontiac, Michigan. GM had spent heavily to automate it, and it was built to turn out something like 350,000 cars a year. The Fiero, even in its best year, used barely a third of that. By 1988, with sales down under 50,000, the line was running at close to a tenth of what it was designed for. An automated factory that big, that empty, doesn't lose money slowly. It hemorrhages. But that emptiness was never the plan. The Fiero was meant to share the plant with a second program, the GM80, a new generation of Camaro and Firebird built the exact same way. Plastic panels bolted over a space frame. 2 cars, 1 line. Together they'd have filled the factory and made the math work. The GM80 was the other half of the business plan. It never arrived. The program ran over budget and overweight, its body panels flexing out of shape under hard cornering, and in 1986, GM cancelled it. That decision didn't just kill a Camaro, it pulled the floor out from under the Fiero, leaving one low-volume sports car alone in a factory built for 10 times its sales. And an automated plant doesn't care how many cars you build. The robots, the tooling, the heat, the staff, the debt GM took on to modernize the place. Those costs barely move whether the line runs flat out or half asleep. Spread across 350,000 cars, they disappear into the sticker price. Spread across 40-some thousand Fieros, they land on every single one. By 1987, each car coming off that line was carrying a share of a factory it could never hope to fill. And by 1988, Roger Smith was in no mood to carry an empty factory. The plant had been bleeding for 2 years by then, and Smith was in the middle of the biggest wave of plant closings in the company's history, shutting lines across GM to satisfy Wall Street while pouring billions into his new Saturn division. An automated assembly line running at a tenth of capacity, building a car the public already filed under the words fire and recall was the easiest number on the page to cross out. So he crossed it out. Those fires were real, but they belonged to the 1984 car, and the 1988 model had nothing to do with them. The early 4-cylinder Fieros ran an oil pan a quart too small. Let the oil drop low, and a weak connecting rod could break, punch through the block, and spray oil onto a hot manifold sitting inches away. When federal safety regulators closed in, GM's recall didn't replace the undersized pan. It handed owners a new dipstick and a sticker telling them to add an extra quart. Resale values cratered. By 1988, the fires were 4 years in the past, but the reputation they left behind made the Fiero an easy car for the accountants to write off. The people who paid for it weren't sitting in a boardroom. They were the buyers left holding a car worth almost nothing. And the roughly 1,200 workers at Pontiac Assembly who built the best Fiero ever made and then watched the line stop for good in August of 1988. It's worth knowing how the car got so cheap in the first place. The Fiero was the work of Aldikacti, a Turkish-born engineer, a protege of John DeLorean, who got it approved by promising GM it was a fuel-efficient commuter, not a sports car that might tangle with the Corvette. The catch was the money, around $400 million for the entire program, a fraction of what an ordinary GM car cost to develop. That's why it wore Chevette parts, and it's why, when the factory lost its second tenant, there was no cushion underneath it, a bare-bones program stranded in a plant built for volume it would never reach. So do the arithmetic. $30 million to finally make the Fiero great, a factory built for 350,000 cars a year, running at a tenth of that, and the one model that was supposed to fill the rest of that line, cancelled 2 years earlier. By 1988, on General Motors' books, the Fiero had stopped being a car and become a half-empty building, and half-empty buildings get closed. The Corvette story is tidier, but the Fiero was ended by a balance sheet, an empty assembly line, and a sister car that never showed up. This is the business story the news coverage missed.